Sleep Story: The Endless Road of the Mail, Part 1. The history of the mail in America is a long and quiet river that flows through time. It begins not with speed, but with the slow and steady rhythm of a horse walking along a dirt path. In the early days of the colonies, the woods were deep and silent. The trees stood tall and thick, blocking out the sun and creating a long tunnel of green and brown. A single rider would move through this landscape, carrying a leather bag filled with letters. The leather was old and cracked from the sun and the rain. It smelled of earth and oil. The horse would step carefully over rocks and roots. The sound of the hooves hitting the packed dirt was a rhythmic thud that echoed softly in the forest. Thud and thud and thud. The rider did not hurry. There was no need to hurry, because the journey was measured in days and weeks, not in hours. The air was cool and smelled of pine needles and damp soil. As the rider moved from one settlement to the next, the landscape changed slowly. The dense forests gave way to open fields where the grass waved gently in the wind. The grass was a pale green, and it stretched out to the horizon, meeting the blue sky in a straight line. The clouds drifted overhead. They were white and fluffy, and they moved with a slowness that matched the pace of the horse. The mail was a sacred trust. Each letter was a piece of paper folded carefully and sealed with red wax. The wax was melted by a candle and pressed with a metal seal. The paper was thick and made of cotton or linen rags. It had a texture that you could feel with your fingertips. The ink was black or brown, made from oak galls and iron. It sat on the surface of the paper in elegant loops and lines. The handwriting was slanted and precise. Each word was written with care and thought. The rider carried these thoughts across the miles. He passed by small wooden houses with smoke rising from stone chimneys. The smoke was gray and thin, and it drifted up into the sky until it disappeared. The people in the houses would look up from their work as the rider passed. They would wave a hand slowly and then return to their tasks. The rhythm of life was slow. It was dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. In the evening, the rider would stop at a tavern or an inn. The inn was a warm place with a fire burning in the hearth. The fire crackled and popped, sending orange sparks up the chimney. The wood was oak or maple, and it burned with a steady heat. The rider would sit by the fire and eat a simple meal of bread and stew. The stew was thick with potatoes and carrots and beef. It was warm and comforting. The room was filled with the low murmur of voices. Men sat at wooden tables drinking ale from pewter mugs. The mugs were cool to the touch and heavy. The light in the room came from candles made of tallow. The flames flickered and cast long shadows on the walls. The shadows danced and swayed. After the meal, the rider would sleep in a bed with a mattress filled with straw or feathers. The blankets were made of wool and were scratchy but warm. The sleep was deep and dreamless. In the morning, the journey would begin again. The sun would rise in the east, painting the sky with colors of pink and orange. The mist would hang low over the fields, covering the ground like a soft white blanket. The air was crisp and cold. The horse would breathe out clouds of steam. The leather saddle would creak as the rider mounted. The journey continued, mile after mile. As the years passed, the paths became roads. The roads were widened and flattened. Wagons began to carry the mail. The wagons were made of wood and iron. The wheels were large and had iron rims. They rolled over the dirt roads with a constant grinding sound. The sound was monotonous and hypnotic. The driver sat on a wooden bench holding the leather reins. The horses pulled the wagon with a steady strength. Their muscles moved under their skin in a rhythmic pattern. The mail bags were piled high in the back of the wagon. They were made of canvas now and were heavy with newspapers and packages. The post office became a central part of every town. It was a place of order and quiet. The walls were lined with wooden boxes. Each box had a small glass window and a number painted in gold. The floor was made of polished wood that creaked softly when you walked on it. The smell of paper and ink and glue filled the air. The postmaster was a person of routine. He would sort the mail with practiced hands. He would pick up a letter, look at the address, and place it in the correct box. Swish and tap, swish and tap. The motion was repetitive and calming. Outside the town, the roads stretched out into the country. This was the beginning of the rural free delivery. A carrier would travel the country roads, bringing the mail to the farmers who lived far from town. The buggy had a black roof to protect the driver from the sun and the rain. The wheels were thin and spoked. They turned and turned, eating up the miles. The mailboxes stood by the side of the road. They were metal and were painted silver or black. Each mailbox had a red flag on the side. If the flag was up, it meant there was mail to be collected. The carrier would stop at each box. The horse would stand patiently, swishing his tail to keep the flies away. The carrier would open the metal door of the box. The hinge would squeak softly. He would place the letters inside and close the door with a click. Then he would lift the red flag if needed. The buggy would move on to the next farm. The farms were large and quiet. The fields were filled with corn or wheat. The corn grew tall and green, with golden tassels at the top. The wind would rustle through the corn stalks, making a sound like whispering paper. The wheat was golden and dry. It swayed in waves when the wind blew. The farmhouse sat back from the road. It was usually white, with a porch that wrapped around the front. A rocking chair would sit on the porch, moving slightly in the breeze. A dog might lie on the steps, sleeping in the sun. The life on the farm was tied to the seasons. In the spring, the farmers would plow the fields. The earth was dark and rich. The plow would turn the soil in long, straight lines. The smell of fresh dirt was strong. In the summer, the crops would grow under the hot sun. The days were long and filled with the buzzing of insects. The cicadas would sing in the trees, a rising and falling drone that never ended. In the fall, the harvest would begin. The days grew shorter, and the air turned cool. The leaves on the trees turned red and gold and brown. They would fall to the ground, covering the grass with a crunchy carpet. The carrier saw it all. He saw the changing of the seasons from the seat of his buggy. He knew every curve of the road and every pothole. He knew which dogs would bark and which ones would wag their tails. He knew the names of all the families on his route. He was a constant presence in a changing world. The mail must go through, rain or shine, snow or sleet. In the winter, the roads would be covered in snow. The world turned white and silent. The snow muffled all the sounds. The buggy wheels were replaced with runners, and the buggy became a sleigh. The horses wore bells on their harnesses. The bells jingled softly as the horse trotted through the snow, jingle and jingle. The sound was bright and clear in the cold air. The carrier wore a heavy coat made of wool or buffalo hide. He wore thick gloves to protect his hands from the cold. His breath came out in white puffs. The snow was deep and untouched. The runners sliced through it, leaving 2 smooth tracks behind. The sky was a pale gray. Sometimes snow would fall gently from the sky. The flakes were large and soft. They landed on the carrier's coat and melted. The silence of winter was profound. It was a heavy silence that wrapped around everything like a blanket. The mailboxes were capped with snow. The carrier would brush the snow away to open the door. Inside, the letters were dry and safe. He would leave the mail and move on. The rhythm of the delivery never changed. It was a cycle that repeated day after day, year after year. As the nation grew, the mail system grew with it. Trains began to carry the mail across the continent. The trains were massive beasts of iron and steam. They chugged across the plains and through the mountains. The sound of the train was a rhythmic clatter, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The wheels rolled over the steel tracks. The smoke from the engine trailed behind in a long, dark plume. Inside the mail car, clerks worked tirelessly. The car was filled with canvas bags and sorting tables. The clerks would stand at the tables as the train swayed back and forth. They had to have steady sea legs to keep their balance. They would sort the mail while the train was moving. They threw the letters into cubbyholes on the wall. Their hands moved with incredible speed. They knew the geography of the country by heart. They knew every town and every junction. The train would rush.
The iron rail stretched across the land like veins of steel connecting the distant corners of the continent. The steam locomotives were the giants of their age. They were built of heavy black iron and brass. They breathed fire and smoke. The train moved with a heavy purpose. It was not flighty or quick, but solid and unstoppable. The engine was a furnace on wheels. The firemen shoveled coal into the firebox. Scrape and throw, scrape and throw. The coal was black and shiny. It tumbled into the orange flames and disappeared. The heat was intense. It radiated from the engine in waves. The water in the boiler turned to steam. The steam built up pressure. It pushed the pistons back and forth. The pistons turned the great steel wheels. The wheels bit into the track. Chug and hiss, chug and hiss. The train began to move. It pulled a long line of cars behind it. The mail car was usually near the front, just behind the tender. It was a rolling office, a workspace that moved at 50 miles an hour. Inside the car, the air was thick with the smell of coal smoke and dry paper. The walls were lined with wooden pigeonholes, hundreds of small square compartments. The clerks stood in the center of the car. They wore canvas aprons to protect their clothes from the dust and ink. The floor vibrated beneath their feet. It was a constant trembling sensation. The train rocked gently from side to side as it went around curves. The clerks adjusted their stance automatically. They leaned with the train. They were like sailors on a ship. Their hands never stopped moving. They picked up letters from a table. They glanced at the address. They flicked the wrist and sent the letter flying into a slot. Thwack and slide, thwack and slide. The sound was rhythmic and precise. The oil lamps hung from the ceiling. They swayed with the motion of the train. The light was yellow and warm. It cast long, moving shadows on the walls. Outside the windows, the world was a blur of green and brown. Trees flashed by. Fences streamed past like ribbons. The train did not stop at every town. That would take too long. But the mail had to be delivered. And so the railway post office used a catcher arm. It was a hook made of steel attached to the side of the car. As the train approached a small station, the clerk would prepare the mail bag. He would hang a heavy canvas sack on the arm. Outside on the platform, the station master had hung the incoming mail bag on a crane. The train roared through the station. The dust swirled. The clerk swung the arm out. Clang! The metal hook caught the bag from the crane. At the same time, the outgoing bag was released. It tumbled onto the platform. The exchange happened in the blink of an eye. Then the station was gone. The train continued into the open country. The clerk pulled the new bag inside. He opened the drawstring. He poured the contents onto the table. The sorting began again. It was a ceaseless cycle. Mile after mile, town after town. The night would fall. The windows would turn black, reflecting the interior of the car. The rhythm of the wheels on the tracks became louder in the darkness. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. It was a lullaby of steel. The clerks worked in a trance. They knew the schedule by heart. They knew when the train would slow down and when it would speed up. They knew the steep grades and the long valleys. They were masters of geography. Every town in the United States had a place in the rack. Every village and hamlet. The train was a lifeline. It carried the business of the nation. Contracts and invoices, love letters and newspapers, money and catalogs. The mail car was a sanctuary of order in a chaotic world. When the train finally arrived at the city terminal, the pace slowed. The steam engine hissed and sighed as it came to a halt. The brakes squealed softly. The doors slid open. The bags were unloaded onto carts. The carts were pushed through the station. The station was a cathedral of transportation. The ceiling was high and vaulted. It was made of glass and iron. Sunlight streamed down in shafts, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The noise of the station was a low hum, voices and footsteps, the rustle of clothing. The mail was taken to the main post office. This was a building of stone and permanence. It stood in the center of the city. The lobby was cool and quiet. The floors were marble, worn smooth by millions of feet. The counters were made of oak and brass. Behind the counters, the clerks worked in a quiet rhythm. The back room was a vast space filled with desks and sorting tables. The light came from tall windows. It was a soft, natural light. The air smelled of ink and glue and old wood. The sounds here were different from the train. Here, there was the scratching of pens on paper, scratch and scratch, the sound of rubber stamps hitting the ink pad and then the paper, thump and thump, the ticking of a large clock on the wall, tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock had a heavy pendulum that swung back and forth. It measured the seconds and the minutes. The time passed slowly. The workers sat on high wooden stools. They wore visors to shield their eyes from the light. They wrote in large ledgers. The pages of the ledgers were lined with pale blue ink. The handwriting was copperplate script, elegant and looping. Every entry was made with care. There were no computers to hum. There were no phones ringing incessantly. Just the quiet sounds of human industry. The typewriter was a new invention. It sat on a heavy metal stand. The keys were round and made of glass. The typist would press a key. The metal arm would swing up and strike the ribbon. Click. The letter would appear on the paper. Click, click, click. The carriage would reach the end of the line. Ding! The typist would push the lever and the carriage would slide back. Zip! The sound was mechanical and repetitive. It was a soothing sound. It meant that work was being done. Files were being filed. Letters were being answered. The bureaucracy was a slow-moving machine. It had its own logic and its own pace. Documents moved from one desk to another. They were stamped and signed. They were folded and placed in envelopes. They were tied with red tape. The piles of paper were neat and orderly. The atmosphere was of concentrated calm. Outside the windows, the city traffic moved by, horses and wagons, early automobiles with spoked wheels. But inside the post office, time seemed to stand still. The focus was on the task at hand. The sorting of the mail continued here as well, but it was finer sorting. It was sorting for the carriers who would walk the streets. The carrier cases were wooden structures with hundreds of slots. The carrier would stand in front of his case. He would arrange the letters in the order of his route. 1st Street, 2nd Street, Maple Avenue, Oak Lane. He would memorize the names and the numbers. He would bundle the letters with leather straps. He would load his leather satchel. The leather was worn and soft. It hung heavy on his shoulder. The weight was familiar. It was the weight of responsibility. The carrier would leave the building and step out into the sunlight. He would begin his walk. The rhythm of his steps matched the rhythm of the train and the horse, step and step. He was the final link in the chain. He brought the world to the door. The sun would move across the sky. The shadows would lengthen. The day would turn to evening. The post office would close its doors. The heavy wooden doors would swing shut. The lock would turn with a solid click. The lights would be extinguished. The building would settle into the night. The only sound would be the ticking of the clock, tick-tock, and the settling of the building, creak and groan. The mail waited in the darkness. It waited for the morning. It waited for the cycle to begin again. The great machine of the Postal Service never truly stopped. It just paused to catch its breath. In the silence of the night, you could almost hear the echo of the trains. You could hear the ghostly sound of the steam whistle. Woo! Woo! You could hear the clip-clap of the horses. You could feel the steady pulse of the network. It wrapped around the world like a blanket of words and paper, connecting us all, even in our sleep. The road goes on and on, smooth and steady, quiet and deep. The destination is rest. The journey is the dream.
The sky became the new ocean for the mail to cross. It began with a sound in the distance, a low drone that grew louder and louder. The early airmail planes were small and fragile things. They were made of wood and canvas and wire. They looked like kites with engines. The pilot sat in an open cockpit exposed to the wind and the weather. He wore a leather helmet that strapped under his chin. He wore thick goggles to protect his eyes from the oil and the air. The scarf around his neck was heavy wool. It fluttered in the slipstream like a flag. The engine was a radial engine. It had cylinders arranged in a circle. It roared with a deep, throaty sound, brum and brum. The propeller spun so fast it became invisible. It was just a shimmering disk in the air. The plane took off from a grass field. The wheels bumped over the uneven ground until the wings caught the air. Then it lifted up. Smoothly and quietly it rose above the trees. The pilot looked down. The world was a patchwork quilt of green and brown. The roads were thin ribbons. The houses were tiny boxes. He was alone in the sky. The airmail pilots flew at night. This was the most dangerous and the most peaceful time. The sun would set in a blaze of red and purple. The sky would turn a deep indigo and then black. The stars would come out one by one. They were bright and cold. The moon would cast a silver light on the clouds. The pilot navigated by the beacons. On the ground below there was a line of towers. Every 10 miles there was a tower with a rotating light. The light would sweep across the darkness, flash and sweep, flash and sweep. It was a lighthouse in a sea of land. The pilot would fly from one light to the next. He followed the chain of lights across the plains and over the mountains. The engine droned on. It was a hypnotic sound, a steady vibration that went into his bones. It was a lonely job, but it was also beautiful. He was the only one awake in the world. He was carrying the words of thousands of people. He was a messenger of the sky. The air was cold and crisp. Sometimes he would fly through a cloud. The world would turn gray and damp. The moisture would bead on his windshield. Then he would burst out the other side into the clear starlight. The mailbags were stowed in the front of the plane. They were safe and dry. The plane flew on through the night. It crossed the great rivers that looked like black snakes winding through the land. It crossed the sleeping cities where the streetlights formed a grid of orange dots. As technology advanced, the planes became larger and faster. The metal skin replaced the canvas. The cockpits were enclosed and heated. The jet engine replaced the propeller. The roar became a whine, a high-pitched whistle that signaled speed. The modern airmail plane is a massive silver bird. It flies high above the weather. It cruises in the stratosphere, where the air is thin and the sky is a dark purple. Inside the cargo hold, it is quiet. The containers of mail sit in rows. They are locked in place. The plane moves through the air with a smoothness that defies gravity. It is a silent arrow shot across the continent. When the plane lands, it is night. The airport is a city of lights, blue lights for the taxiways and white lights for the runways. The tires touch the concrete with a chirp. The engines reverse thrust with a roar. The plane slows down and turns off the runway. It taxis to the cargo terminal. This is a world of machines and efficiency. The buildings are vast and windowless. They are humongous warehouses that hum with energy. The doors open and the containers are unloaded. They are moved on scissor lifts and dollies. Everything is standardized. Everything fits. The containers are brought inside the sorting center. This is the heart of the modern postal system. It is a place of wonder. The ceiling is so high it is lost in the shadows. The floor is concrete and polished to a shine. The space is filled with the sound of machinery. It is not a loud noise, but a constant background hum and whir. There are miles of conveyor belts. They wind through the building like a roller coaster. They go up and down and around corners. The belts are made of rubber and fabric. They move with a steady, relentless pace. The letters and packages ride on the belts. They look like a river of boxes. A scanner sits over the belt. It emits a red laser beam. It dances over the packages. It looks for the barcode. The barcode is a series of black and white lines. It holds all the information: the destination, the route, the tracking number. The scanner reads the code in a fraction of a second. Beep! A soft electronic beep. The computer knows where the package is going. It sends a signal to a diverter. The diverter is a plastic arm that swings out. It gently pushes the package onto a different belt. Slide and push, slide and push. The package moves to the correct chute. It slides down a spiral slide. It lands softly in a large canvas bin. The process is mesmerizing to watch. It is a ballet of automation. Thousands of packages moving in perfect synchronization. There are very few people. The machines do the work. The people monitor the screens. They watch the flow. They ensure that nothing gets stuck. The air in the facility is cool and conditioned. It smells of cardboard and packing tape. The lights are bright fluorescent tubes. They cast a clean white light on everything. There are no shadows here, just the clean lines of the machines. The mail is sorted into trays. The trays are loaded into carts. The carts are rolled onto trucks. These are the modern trucks, the tractor-trailers that ply the interstate highways. They are white with the eagle logo on the side. The driver climbs into the cab. The seat is high and comfortable. It has air suspension that absorbs the bumps. The engine is a diesel. It idles with a low rumble, rumble and rumble. The truck pulls out of the bay. It joins the traffic on the highway. It drives through the night to the local distribution center. The local center is smaller and quieter. Here the mail is prepared for the final mile. The carriers arrive in the early morning. The sun is just coming up. The sky is pink and gold. The air is fresh. The carriers drive the white delivery trucks. They are small and boxy. They are called LVVs, long life vehicles. They are iconic. They have the steering wheel on the right side. This lets the carrier reach the mailbox without getting out. The engine of the LVV has a distinctive sound, a high-pitched whine that is familiar to everyone in the neighborhood. The carrier drives down the suburban street. The houses are quiet. The lawns are green and trimmed. The sprinklers are on. Hiss and click, hiss and click. The water arcs over the grass. The carrier stops at a group of mailboxes. He reaches out the window. He puts the letters in the box.
He closes the lid. Snap. He drives to the next box. Stop and start. Stop and start. It is a rhythm that has not changed in 100 years, even if the vehicle has. The mail is delivered. The letters sit in the dark metal box waiting for the owner. A bill, a magazine, a postcard from a friend. They wait in silence. The carrier finishes the route. He drives back to the station. The truck is parked in a long row of identical trucks. The engine cools down. Tick, tick, tick. The day is done. The system has worked again. It has moved millions of pieces of paper across the world. It has done it quietly and efficiently. The sun sets. The streetlights come on. The world settles down to sleep. The mail is safe. The messages have been delivered. The connection has been made. In the house, a person walks to the mailbox. They open the door. They take out the letter. They hold it in their hand. It is a physical connection to another person. It traveled by truck and by plane and by machine. It traveled through the cold night air and the warm sorting center. It has arrived. The person walks back to the house. The door closes. The street is empty. The wind blows softly through the trees. The leaves rustle. Shh! The night takes over. The stars come out again. The same stars that the airmail pilot saw 80 years ago. They look down on a world that is connected by invisible lines of communication. The road of the mail is endless. It is a circle. It is a river. It is a dream. The quiet hum of the world continues. The breathing of the sleeper is slow and deep. In and out. In and out.
Sleep Story: The Secret Life of a Library at Night, Part 1. The great library stands at the center of the city like a quiet mountain of stone. It is a fortress of silence amidst the noise of the world. As the sun begins to set in the west, the heavy wooden doors are prepared to close. These doors are made of ancient oak and are bound with iron. They are thick and heavy, and they move on hinges that have been oiled to perfection. The head librarian stands by the entrance. He wears a gray cardigan and glasses that sit low on his nose. He looks out at the street one last time. The cars are rushing by. The people are walking fast, but inside the library, time moves at a different pace. He pushes the door shut. Thud. The sound is deep and solid. It is a sound of finality. The lock is turned with a heavy metal key. Click. The world outside is now gone. The noise of the traffic is muffled until it becomes just a distant hum, like the sound of the ocean far away. The librarian walks across the marble floor. His shoes make a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. He reaches the wall of switches. One by one, he flicks them down. The bright overhead lights flicker and die. The room is not left in total darkness. Instead, it is filled with shadows and soft pools of amber light from the security lamps. The library settles into the night. It breathes a sigh of relief. The air in the main hall is cool and still. It smells of old paper and leather and dust. It is a sweet and musty smell that is comforting to the soul. It smells of vanilla and almond, which is the scent of aging paper. The main hall is vast, with a ceiling that rises high into the gloom. The ceiling is painted with faded frescoes of clouds and angels, but in the dark you can only see vague shapes. The floor is made of terrazzo tiles in patterns of black and white. It shines dimly in the half-light. In the center of the hall stands the information desk. It is a massive circle of polished dark wood. It is empty now. The computers are dark. The chairs are pushed in. The surface of the wood is smooth and cool to the touch. Beyond the desk, the stacks begin. The stacks are the heart of the library.
They are rows and rows of tall metal shelves. They stretch back into the shadows like a forest of steel and paper. The shelves are packed tight with books, millions of books. They stand shoulder to shoulder. Their spines are of every color, red and blue and green and black. Some are faded and worn, some are bright and new, but in the dim light they all look gray and unified. The silence here is profound. It is a heavy silence that wraps around you like a blanket. It is not an empty silence, but a waiting silence. The books are waiting. They are sleeping. The dust motes dance in the air. You can see them only where the moonlight cuts through the high windows. The windows are tall and arched. The glass is thick and wavy. The moonlight streams in, creating long beams of silver that angle down to the floor. The dust floats in these beams. It moves slowly, drifting up and down on invisible currents of air. It glimmers like gold dust. It settles softly on the tops of the books. It settles on the floor. It settles on the tables. The tables are long and made of oak. They have green glass lamps in the center. The lamps are off now. The brass bases of the lamps gleam dully in the dark. The chairs are heavy wooden chairs with straight backs. They are arranged perfectly around the tables. No one is sitting in them. The only movement is the slow drift of the dust. If you listen very closely, you might hear the buildings settling. Old buildings make sounds at night. The wood expands and contracts. The pipes groan softly deep within the walls. A floorboard might creak for no reason. Creak? It is just the building shifting its weight. It is getting comfortable for the night. The air is dry. It has to be dry to protect the paper. The temperature is constant. It is a controlled environment designed for preservation. Walking down an aisle between the shelves, you feel the presence of the words. The aisle is narrow and long. The shelves tower above you. You are surrounded by knowledge. But tonight, the knowledge is resting. The books are just objects. They are blocks of paper and glue and thread. The bindings are interesting to touch. Some are rough like canvas. Some are smooth like silk. Some are bumpy with embossed letters. The old leather bindings are crumbling slightly at the edges. They leave a fine red powder on the shelf. The titles are written in gold or silver leaf. They catch the stray bits of light. History of Rome, Principles of Botany, The Life of the Sea. The books stand in their assigned places. Call numbers are painted on their spines in white ink. They are ordered and logical. Dewey Decimal, Library of Congress, a place for everything and everything in its place. This order brings a sense of calm. The world outside is chaotic and unpredictable, but inside the library, everything is organized, everything makes sense. You can walk for miles in this building and never leave the quiet. There are staircases that spiral up to the mezzanine levels. The stairs are made of iron with intricate patterns. Your hand slides along the smooth wooden railing as you climb. The metal steps ring softly under your feet. Ping, ping. From the balcony, you can look down at the main floor. It looks like a chessboard. The tables and the shelves are the pieces. The moonlight makes patterns on the floor. It is a landscape of stillness. The shadows lengthen as the moon moves across the sky. The shadows stretch out from the legs of the tables. They stretch out from the pillars. The pillars are made of marble and cool to the touch. They hold up the roof with effortless strength. In the reading room, the carpet is thick and red. It muffles your footsteps completely. Here, the silence is even deeper. There are large armchairs covered in leather. The leather is cracked and worn soft by years of use. It smells of tobacco and old polish. You can imagine sitting in one of these chairs. You would sink down into the cushion. You would be surrounded by the hush. There is a large fireplace at one end of the room. It is cold and dark now. The ashes have been swept away. The grate is black iron. Above the fireplace hangs a portrait of the founder. He looks down with stern but kind eyes. The oil paint is dark and cracked. He watches over his books in the dark. The periodicals section is filled with magazines and newspapers. They are hung on wooden rods. The paper is thin and fragile. It rustles if you walk past quickly. Swish, swish. But you do not walk quickly. You walk slowly. You respect the sleep of the library. In the back, there are the special collections. This room is locked behind a glass door. Inside, the air is even colder. The books here are very old. They are rare and precious. They are kept in boxes or behind wire mesh. They are the elders of the tribe. They have seen centuries pass. They have survived wars and fires and floods. Now they rest in the safety of the dark. The vellum pages are stiff and crinkled. The ink is brown with age. The covers are made of wood or heavy leather with metal clasps. They are sleeping deeply. The library is a sanctuary. It is a vault for human thought. But at night, it is just a physical space. It is a collection of textures and smells and shadows. The darkness softens the edges of everything. It blurs the lines between the shelves. The rows seem to go on forever into the gloom. It is a labyrinth of peace. There is no urgency here. There are no deadlines. The due dates do not matter until the morning. The fines are forgotten. There is only the existence of the paper and the ink. The paper was once trees in a forest. The ink was once soot and oil. The glue was once bone and hide. The materials have returned to a state of nature. They are quiet. The night deepens. The city outside sleeps, but the library sleeps deeper. It is a sleep that has lasted for 100 years. The dust continues to fall. The shadows continue to move. The silence continues to hold the building in its hand. It is a perfect stillness, a pause in the rushing stream of time.
Leaving the main reading room, you walk softly down a corridor that leads to a special place known as the map room. This room feels different from the rest of the library. It is not defined by the vertical lines of books standing on shelves, but by horizontal lines. The room is filled with wide, flat cabinets made of golden oak. They stand waist-high and cover the floor in neat rows like islands in a calm sea. The tops of the cabinets are wide and smooth, designed for spreading out large sheets of paper. In the darkness, the wood glows with a faint warmth. The air here smells of something sharper than the main hall. It smells of vellum and ink and the ozone smell of old parchment. You approach one of the cabinets. The front is a stack of shallow drawers. Each drawer has two brass handles that are shaped like half moons. They are cool to the touch. You place your hands on the handles and pull gently. The drawer slides open on wooden runners. It is a heavy movement, but smooth. Slide and stop. The sound is a low friction whisper. Inside the drawer lies a map. It is resting under a protective cover of tissue paper. The tissue paper is translucent and milky white. You lift the edge of the tissue. It makes a delicate crinkling sound. Crinkle and hush. Underneath lies the world. It is a map of a coastline from 300 years ago. The paper is thick and has a texture like fabric. It is cream-colored with spots of foxing that look like tiny rust marks. The ink is black and brown. The lines are drawn by hand. They are shaky but precise. The ocean is marked with stippling, tiny dots that fade into the white. There are drawings of ships with billowing sails, sailing on the paper sea. There are drawings of sea monsters curling in the corners. You run your finger in the air above the map, tracing the line of the coast. You follow the rivers as they wind their way inland.
The names of the towns are written in a calligraphy that is hard to read. They are names from a forgotten time. You close the drawer slowly. It slides back into place with a soft thud. You open another one. This one holds blueprints. They are deep blue with white lines. They show the plans for a building that was never built. The smell of the ammonia from the old blueprint process is faint but present. The lines are straight and architectural, doorways and windows, staircases and roofs, a ghost of a building sleeping in a drawer. The map room is a place of boundaries and borders, but at night the borders dissolve in the dark. The countries on the maps merge into one gray landscape. The mountains and the valleys are flattened by the shadows. You leave the map room and find a narrow door in the corner. It leads to a spiral staircase made of iron. The steps are perforated with small holes. You begin to descend, down and down. The air gets cooler with every step. You are going into the archives. This is the basement of the library. It is the foundation. The air here smells of stone and earth and dry cardboard. It is a mineral smell. The floor is concrete, painted a glossy gray. Your footsteps echo slightly. Clip, clop. The shelves here are not made of wood. They are made of industrial gray steel. They are utilitarian and strong. They are moved by turning a large wheel on the end of the stack. You turn the wheel. It squeaks softly, squeak and grind. The heavy shelves roll apart on tracks in the floor. They create an aisle where there was none before. It is like opening a secret passage. Inside the shelves are boxes, thousands of boxes. They are gray or tan. They have metal reinforced corners. They are tied shut with white cotton string. The string is knotted in a bow. Inside these boxes are the raw materials of history. There are bundles of letters written by soldiers to their sweethearts. The paper is thin and brittle. The handwriting is hurried. There are diaries kept by farmers recording the weather and the crops. Rain today, sun tomorrow. There are ledgers from old stores listing the price of flour and sugar. The archives are a sleeping memory. It is a place where the past is stored in boxes. You walk down the long concrete aisle. The fluorescent lights are off. The only light comes from the small safety bulbs caged in wire. They cast long, cross-hatched shadows on the floor. It feels like being in the hold of a large ship, a ship that is not moving, a ship that is anchored in time. You see a row of filing cabinets. They are painted olive green. They hold photographs. You open a drawer. It is packed tight with manila envelopes. Inside are black and white photos. They smell of chemicals and silver. The faces in the photos look out into the dark. They are smiling or serious. They are wearing hats and coats from another era. They are frozen in a moment of time. You close the drawer. Click. The sound is sharp in the silence. You move deeper into the archives. There is a section for newspapers. They are bound in massive books that are as large as a tabletop. The bindings are black canvas. The dates are stamped in gold on the spine. 1890, 1910, 1925. You touch the spine of a volume. It is rough and dusty. Inside, the news of the world is sleeping. Headlines about wars and peace. Ads for tonics and hats. The paper is yellow and fragile. It would crumble if you turned the pages too fast. So you let it be. You let the news sleep. The archives are the quietest place in the whole city. The walls are thick concrete. No sound from the street can reach here. No sirens, no horns. Just the hum of the air circulation system. It is a white noise that helps to preserve the silence. It keeps the humidity low. It keeps the temperature cool. It protects the paper from the rot of time.
You feel a sense of heavy peace here. It is the peace of things that are finished. The lives in the boxes are over. The buildings in the blueprints are gone or built. The news in the papers is old. There is nothing to do here but rest. The weight of the building above you feels comforting. All those books, all those words pressing down. You are at the bottom of the ocean of knowledge. You find a small wooden table in the corner. It is a work table for the archivists. There is a magnifying glass on the table. The glass is thick and convex. It reflects the dim light like a pool of water. There is a pair of white cotton gloves. The archivists wear them to handle the documents. The gloves lie on the table like empty hands. They are waiting for the morning, waiting to touch the past again. But for now, they are still. You lean against a steel pillar. The metal is cold on your shoulder. You close your eyes for a moment. You can visualize the layers of the library, the high, airy reading room at the top, the dense forest of stacks in the middle, and here, the cool, dense roots of the archives at the bottom. It is a complete organism, a living thing made of paper and ink. It sleeps a dreamless sleep. The dust settles on the concrete floor. A spider weaves a web in the corner of a shelf. The web is invisible in the dark. The spider moves slowly, leg over leg, constructing its home in the silence. The archives are a place of patience. The documents have waited years to be read. They can wait for one more night. They can wait forever. The time here is measured in centuries, not in hours. The ticking of a clock would seem out of place. There is only the long, slow duration of existence. You turn the wheel on the stack again. The shelves roll back together. They close up the aisle. The boxes are hidden once more. The secret passage is gone. The wall of steel is solid again. You walk back towards the stairs. Your shadow follows you, long and thin. You leave the gray coolness of the basement. You climb up the spiral steps, up towards the wood and the leather of the main floors. The air gets warmer as you climb. The smell changes from stone to paper. You emerge back into the map room. The oak cabinets are still there, glowing in the dark. The maps are still sleeping in their drawers. The world is still flat and folded. You pause to listen. The silence is unbroken. The library is a fortress. It is a sanctuary. It is a vault of dreams.